I recently graduated from a CDL school and decided to get a job relating to my field. After applying to every job that involved driving onto vehicles that I can find now, I got a reply about an hour later for a bus driver position at Frederickson High School. The message read, "Hello George, we ever do your application? I have decided that you would be perfect for position. Your first day will start tomorrow. Your bus's number is at 458 and it is located any bus yard on 207th Street. You can arrive at the bus yard at any time, but please arrive at the school before 4 a.m. This is when these students get dismissed. Once these students enter the bus, you can deliver them to their 5 stops on Old Military Road." Ernest Play, Rick said. Principal of Frederickson High School. I was a bit confused on why there was no interview, but nevertheless I took the job anyway, not wanting to look at what I thought was a gifted horse in the mouth. I also thought that it was weird that the school hours I took place during the night, but I assumed that the school operated at 24 hours a day, dividing students and teachers, and do 4 groups reached chap to follow us social distancing guidelines or just for efficiency in general. Not around 3:15 a.m. and I got into my rusty 1974 Ford F-250 and drove to the address listed in the message. It wasn't that far away, about a 15-minute drive did a vehicle gate next to a guard shack. The bus yard consisted of a flat slab of dirt with several buses are part of the back with a large space in the front to allow play. Never in the buses. And of the spots surrounding the yard. I was a fan with the aforementioned gates and Jack replacing a part of the fans in the garden is. Jack was startled by my arrival and proceeded to open the window on us slightly. "No, who are you?" "Yes, hello, never played. I'm George Redwood. I'm here for Boss 458. Are you okay?" The paper, looking at it briefly before putting it down. He then passed me a key I presumed was for my boss. "My okay, sir, here's your key. Find your bus and replace its parking spot with your truck and then you can go." The gate then opened and I didn't see it asked. I drove my truck through the gate and got out to find my boss and then throw my bus to the front of the yard. Now I've been watching back to my truck and parked it in my bus's original spot before going back to my bus and driving it back to the gate. My boss was one of those buses with the flat front, the engine in the back and it had the driver in front of the front wheels. I don't know what the official name of this design is. Now I noticed that the bus I was giving had many dents and scratches, mostly on the front bumper, but I didn't think much of it and I read my shift anyway. I arrived at the school at 3:47 a.m. I noticed that there was only one bus for the school, of that being mine. This school was a very small, so it made sense why there was only one bus. While I waited for the students to be dismissed, I found a list of rules, along with a map and a gap between the steering wheel and the windshield. Rules for Frederickson High School business saying you is to follow these rules and driving on Old Military Road. We cannot ensure your safety if you break any of these rules. 1. Do not use any electronic devices for navigation. They will try to deceive you. If we printed out a map for you to follow up to the bus stops that you can drop kids off at 125 with 3 walls with the roof, what's the opening of being on the front? The bus stop's number will be on both sides of all 3 balls, and if you stop at a bus stop that is not to one of the above, leave the stop immediately and continue your journey here. Try not to look at anything nearby a fake stop, besides checking a wall to see if it's a valid stop. 3. The road is supposed to be very old, windy and unmaintained. If the road suddenly changes to straight road that appears to be a newly paved and the scenery starts repeating, immediately slam on the brakes and turn around before it's too late. Once the road starts covering again and his straight part is and no longer visible, you can turn around and continue your journey. If turning around is not possible, shift the bus into reverse and drive until you find a place to turn around or the road or returns to normal. For once the road reaches a dead end, turn around to reverse until the end of the road is no longer visible, similar to Rule 3, 5. If the road merges with another road, remember which side you came from. This will be important if you have to turn around. Do not drive in the road that you did not come from. 6. If any other vehicles, I don't care about the minor damage to the bus. You can easily bosh through any cars or light tracks. Let's be careful around the larger vehicles that could put up a fight. Do not drop off any students. If your bus is currently being produced by any vehicles. Are you disabled? One recently and it crashed and you're a bus stop. 7 o'clock, if your boss gets stuck for whatever reason, alert the student center. Don't know what to do. There is until dawn and then contact us to get you out of there. No pay will be deducted if this happens. 8 o'clock, if you hear a church bell, avoid going towards the source, and if it's behind you, you're good. If it's on your side or in front of you, turn around and get as far away as you can until the ringing stops. Once you can no longer hear the bell, you can turn around and continue your journey. This usually doesn't last long. 9. If you see a creature on your right running parallel to your boss, do not under any circumstances open any doors and windows. While it will always run at the speed of your bias, you can confuse it by constantly accelerating and decelerating. Doing that may allow you to get into a position in which you can run it over. This is the only known way to stop it. 10. If the engine stops for seemingly no reason, immediately start it up again in Florida. Do not look at what is behind the bus, and if that doesn't work, refer to Rule 7 for everyone's safety. 11 o'clock, if you see a human on the road, run it over. Even ever resembles a loved one, it's not a human. If you fail to run it over here, skip any remaining stops and return to the bus yard as quickly as possible. Do not, under any circumstances, open any doors or windows. If you have to turn around for whatever reason, do so as quickly as possible, despite the fact that you likely won't see it again and it is still following you. What? Once you arrive at the bus yard, I don't know what to do. 12 o'clock, if you see a mansion in the distance, turn off all lights. In Florida, none of our students live here. Its position on the road, it changes often, sometimes, and not appearing at all. The owners are deaf, but they can still see you at the part of the road directly in front of the mansion is straight and you can turn your lights back. On Wednesday you're surrounded by forest again, so you'll be fine, and this mansion is at least twice as tall as the forest and it's light from the room. So if you pay attention, you can spot it from far enough away that you can turn off your high beams and headlights before they notice the light. If you see a ridiculously bright light behind you and they saw you. If this happens, I put on the modified sunglasses in the glove compartment and get out of there as quickly as you can, and the students are prepared with some of their sunglasses to prevent being blinded by the light, so don't worry about that. If you are forced to turn around for whatever, the owners are chasing you and return to the bus yard if necessary. When the light disappears and you've lost them, you can continue your journey, yet keep all doors and windows closed during this time. 13. The true end of this road merges with a larger road and a three-way stop, and if any students are still in the bus, once you pass 5 stars, go back to the front of the road and try again. Keep doing this until all students have reached their stops, or if you get too tired to continue. I was very confused on what to think of this. Sure, it sounds impossible, but is a long-time lurker of this subreddit. I know that I should take these rules seriously, and nevertheless I continue waiting for the students to be dismissed. And I came. What's the plan? my will follow the rules unless they could potentially harm someone. If they are fake, it's such as the vehicle ramen. If I can prove a rule to be true without breaking any of them, I will assume that they are all real. Then I'll follow them all mad. At 4 a.m. these students exited the school, then take out of my boss, and I estimated that 200% capacity under these social distance. Despite the situation, most of the students were very jealous, as if they had been going to the school for so long that this didn't scare them anymore. Once all the students had entered the bus, I closed the door and I got on the road. The road was a 2-lane winding road through a forest, though it was paved. It looked like it had been maintained for decades, with the potholes poorly patched with the pothole feelings that look like chunks of the First World Lightning McQueen paved in cars. Roads like this were nothing unusual here in upstate New York. The first 10 minutes were uneventful and I dropped off at 3 o'clock at Stop On with no complications. That was until I heard that a student scream, "They're here." I looked at me, left here, and sure enough, I saw a pair of headlights in the distance. Rule number 6, if any other vehicles appear in the road, disable them by any means possible. I accelerate at the bus, but the repair of headlights accelerated faster. They caught up to me in a matter of seconds and it started tailgating me. He got so close that the headlights were no longer visible from the rear window, but I still know. It was back there. What is happening? And I yelled at the students even though I knew exactly what was going on, but I was still hoping that this was all. The joke is several students reported once, but I couldn't decide for what any of them are saying. Should I brake, check the vehicle? Every student replied yes, and so I did, and I slammed on the brakes, causing my bus to come to a halt. Within seconds I heard screeching coming from both vehicles, shortly followed by a loud crunch from the back of the bus. I haven't accelerated. The boss, looking at the rear window to see the vehicle behind me, had stopped chasing me, not collision, a bad speed. I must have broken something important under the hood as we were going 60 plus at the time of the collision. About a minute later I arrived at a stop to do. Students got up, a boy and a girl, so I assumed I was far enough away from the other vehicle to drop them off. I opened the doors and they were about to stop off, until what we noticed our mistake. That wasn't stop to, it was stop. The rule number 2, the bus stops that you can drop kids off after 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you stop at a bus stop that is not one of the above, leave the stop immediately and continue your journey. I immediately sped off, closing the doors while the boss was already moving. The two students were still at the front of the, grabbing the rail in to avoid falling into the dramatic acceleration. Not even a second after I closed the doors I heard it demonic screeching for my ride driver, Luck, one of the students. She was pointing at the door as revealing that something didn't manage to get a part of itself, a wedge between the doors. As I had to focus on the road, I didn't have much time to look at it, but I was still able to catch a glimpse of whatever she was pointing at. They looked like an arm of a massive gingerbread man except and reflected no light. I can hear whatever that arm was attached to being dragged across the asphalt to sign in the game of wood and metal. I briefly opened the door, is causing the creature to lose its grip and fall to the ground. What the heck was that? And I asked the students who were still on the staircase. I don't know, replied the female student. I've seen that thing. The Fig bus stop is fairly uncommon. Manually happens at least once a month, but the creature it usually don't get to the bus in time anyway. The male students returned to a seat. This advantage for the female student. Actually, how long have you been here? I lived here since I was a baby yet, and every house here has its own set of my family could afford. So we've been living together ever since now. And what's your name? She added, George, and you and Angela. Okay, would you mind staying up here so we can? This is the police. Stop your vehicle immediately. I'm asking, the voice yelled to through a megaphone. The voice sounded like a pathetic attempt to be a human. I was completely oblivious to the police cruiser and he left lane. The other students were also distracted by us, so they weren't able to warn me like they did last time. I slowed down my bus, causing the cruiser to start passing me, intending to do a pit maneuver once it was in position. But when I saw on the cab will haunt me forever. The two creatures inside were vaguely humanoid, it enough for them to operate a motor vehicle designed for humans, and they look like the creature from Venom, but covered in bluish-black scales, as if they were reptiles. The one of the passenger seat turned its head at 90 degrees to look at me without moving anything below a snack, its eyes were in vertical lines stretching from the top of the mouth to the top of the weather, like the eyes of you sick people from the Henry Stickmin collection, except they emitted a white light for them. Really, Carol Bryan from Minecraft. The two of us stared at each other for what felt like forever. I was not concerned about the fact that I wasn't paying attention to the road I sent out, completely forgot I was driving a bus. Now I even forgot that I existed altogether. The entire concept of anything I was looking at vanished from my mind as if I was in the latest stages of dementia. All I knew was the bright light emitting from the creature's eyes. After an unmeasurable amount of time, and we broke eye contact with the cruiser and got stuck between a rock and a school bus. I immediately regained the concept of existence and realized what was going on. The bus had been going in a straight line, but the road wasn't straight and the bus had been very into the left lane this whole time until the bus was pushing the cruiser against the cliff on the left. This caused the cruiser to come to a halt almost instantly. I immediately got back into my lane to avoid and meeting a similar fate to the cruiser. "You're finally back and do the," screamed interest from my face. She got done and cried on the floor while repeating the same sentence and multiple times throughout. How long was I staring at that thing? I asked her. There's a tissue box between the dashboard and the windshield. You should probably take off your mask until you're done crying, and I wanted to come for dinner, but I had no idea what I was supposed to do in this situation, so I just let her cry on the floor while rest and gets my right leg. This usually works for me when I'm having a breakdown, but I have no idea how typical brain RF Angela is a neurotypical in the first place. Less than a minute after the crash I arrived at stop number 3, 2 students and got up to exit. So Angela got out of the way so they could get off at the stop and begin to track down the ominous path of beside it. As I left the stop, Angela answered my question from earlier. "You were looking at that thing for like 5 minutes, she said, and little stiff, that I can do anything. I couldn't access the brakes, I could barely move the steering wheel. At least your foot wasn't on the diesel." I laughed. "I just called the accelerator. Which is stupider, calling a liquid fuel gas or calling the accelerator the gas? I guess we should pay attention to what's going on around us so something doesn't sneak up on us like last time." "A good idea. Well, I'm going back to where's my seat so I don't get heated through the windshield, but if you need any help or have any more questions for me, just call me and I'll come right back up here, alright?" Minutes later I heard clunking noises from the back of the bus before any of us could comprehend what was going on. The engine stopped to real time. If the engine stops, immediately start it up again in Florida, pause, and if that doesn't work, refer to Rule 7 for everyone's safety. I desperately tried to start the engine but it was no use. The bus was still invited on the road because of inertia, but I could barely move. The steering wheel power steering was disabled. When the engine turned off, the road was still relatively straight enough for me to stay on the road with my very limited steering. But if I encountered a car, if I would have to stop the Austin execute Rule 7. The rules implies something behind the bus and managed to turn off the engine, and that's when I noticed a pair of headlights suddenly appeared behind me. The unseen vehicle went into the left lane and accelerated until it was beside me. It was the cruiser from earlier. Those guys had turned off the lights and followed my tail lights to navigate the road. I immediately stopped looking at it to avoid being hypnotized again. After holding down the starter for about 10 seconds, the engine finally came back to life and I floored it to the cruiser. Noticed this and accelerated. Now that I've got my power steering back, I swerved into the left lane directly ahead. I heard a loud crunch. For my last, I looked into my left mirror and saw that the cruiser wasn't no longer following me. The entire chassis was bent with the corner of my bus collided with the back right door. The things attempted to hypnotize me through the mirror, but they were too far away at this point to affect me. The seconds after the crash I saw a stop for on the right, but skipped it because the cruiser was way too close to it. The hill was still on the left, but the area on the right was flat enough to fit a few houses. These houses were fairly large, probably about 2,500 square feet on the top 2 floors, and didn't from the bus stop. So this was the first time I got to see the houses. As I passed the houses, I decided to ask you a few questions to the residents. Can someone who lives at Stop for It come up here for a moment? I have questions about the houses. A boy from the seat behind me came up. How much does it actually cost? Live here, duh. But before I could say anything else, I saw an old man with a cane slowly cross the road. Roll 11. If you see a human on the road, run it over. Even if it resembles a loved one, it is not a human. I already had enough faith in the rules at this point to know that it was not a human, but the screeching he made won. I ran him over further and after a short pause the boy answered my question. $50 a month for me at least, and yes, we have rules, and just as weird and terrifying as the ones in here. Oh wow, that's not as much of a bargain as it sounds like. Anyone who lives here is either extremely poor or is oblivious to what they were getting themselves into. Most of the cost is paid at the mental and sometimes physical trauma that comes with living here. Yeah, I heard the stories about places like this and definitely not worth it, and I thought you could report any of this to the police. There is some other authority here and my family actually did have to call 911 mines and we told the operator that some dude with a gun was in our house and nobody believes the officers that showed up in forest to Fred the creature that terrorizes the residents. It stopped for her to retreat back to the forest and maybe we could tell you. Or my name is Tommy, by the way. Nice meeting you, Tommy. Yeah, I would like to hear your stories about your life here sometime. And Tommy was about to return to his seat when he noticed something. Oh crap, Rule 9, the old 9, if you see a creature on your right running parallel to your eyes, do not, under any circumstances, open any doors or windows. Wallet will always run at the speed of your bias. You can confuse it by constantly accelerating and decelerating. Doing that, I may allow you to get into a position in which you can run it over. This is the only known way to stop it. I looked to the right and I saw it running beside the bus door. It was a creature running on all 4 days. It was like a brute version of the creatures in the cruiser. Its arms and legs were nearly identical and it was running like the bus was going at 40 miles per hour at this point, a very appropriate speed for this road. A high speed up. But so today, and Tommy quickly ran back to his seat as the bus was starting to become unstable, as I drove way too fast for this road. Now at over 80 miles per hour. The thing was still beside the door and it had been since I had spotted it. Didn't decelerate it quickly, now 60 miles per hour. I am the bus right attitude and run it over as the creature attempted to slow down. And before I could celebrate, I saw a pair of tail lights. I had the tail lights brightness too as the vehicle slowed down. They saw me, and this wasn't anything small either. It was a semi-truck. The truck slowed all the way down to 20 miles per hour. For me to do the same I need. The driver was playing, looking for my eyes, but with the 40-feet trailer behind the truck, this may be precision required for hypnosis incredibly difficult. They quickly realized this wasn't going to work and it stopped as I thought the truck. We brainstormed ideas and how to repeat the thing, even citing past experiences with the large vehicles like this one. But to my right, above the forest, I saw something unnatural, the mansion. It was at least 2 floors taller than the forest. It was also a very large, horizontally as well. I didn't know how to describe the building other than saying it reminded me of it. What's the way that it was surrounded by, allied with the creature driving the truck? I don't think so, replied Angela. I really see them interact, and if they do, it's usually hostile, though they're not as aggressive as they are. Too wise. Oh good, you going to make the mansion owners attack the truck? Aren't you a hard time? You say it exactly. Well, just get as far away from the track as you can so they don't see you too. Reply to me. I'm alright. I turned off my lights once we were about 500 feet away from the mansion. The truck driver looked back at us for the mirror for a few seconds. The light illuminated the cab, has it? The driver was trying to say, I know you're still back. As we slowed the approach to the mansion, I didn't touch the air brakes to avoid being heard about the truck driver. It may have known I was still behind it, but it didn't know how far away I was. Once I was about 200 feet away, the bus was down to 2 miles per hour. I pulled the parking brake, causing the bus to come to a halt silently. The truck was oblivious to what I was doing and it was still going for it very slowly. For some reason, it seems that it was trying to stall me. Until reinforcements arrived, we all got our sunglasses to protect our eyes from what was about to happen, ready to put them on at any moment. The moment the truck slide struck the road in front of the Magic, it happened for the split second. I saw the light at 4:45. The sound of the engine got the attention of the truck driver, but it wasn't able to turn around and reverse very quickly and due to the trailer, so it ended up having to go for it to the owners. Now that the I went back in the drive and continued down the road, though and not very quickly, to not catch up with the truck. Nice, slow down even more so I can get a better look at the now vacant building. The front of the Magic had a wooden walls with a concrete base. There is a hole in the front with many equally sized rooms, with one window across the walls, and was illuminated by light bulbs on the chandelier. Playroom set a wide variety of contents. Some looked natural or something weird and some were disturbing. One room looked like a kitchen, one like a bedroom, one was almost completely filled with a pile of wires, one was a prison cell. One had 10 is a black cats inside and 1 out of 4 covered in spikes with doll heads on them. How original. The room full of cats. Me to stop the bus. Why is there a directly behind me? I don't think we've ever gotten a good look at the mansion before. This is the first time someone to manage to distract the owners. Another student replied, I pulled the parking brake and I got out of my seat. I want to investigate the cat room. I told the students, go to the window, but don't answer. Imagine just don't. The same student from earlier I had replied and parked the bus right next to the window. Angela added, wait, hold on. What is your name? I asked the anonymous student. Oh, I'm Joseph. Alright, it's good to know what I did, what Joseph said. I positioned the bus so that the doors were right next to the window of the cat room. Now I got out tonight. Can cats everywhere, very malnourished, and the smell was rough. There was an island literally made of crap in the center, and definitely not okay. I grabbed a rock and I smashed the window several times before the windows put in half. I could have used the gun, but I didn't want to waste any bullets or attract any unwanted attention. Tommy, Angela, and 2 other students came out to help. Once the glass painted, we 8,010 a concentrated spots until we had created a hole large enough for the cats to get through. As soon as we had pointed this out to them, the cats rushed out to freedom. Whatever they were going to get themselves into in this forest was a better fate than whatever the owners were doing with them in there. The wire room was one on her way from the cat room with the prison cell in between the two. I walked over to investigate. a few $1,000 for all that copper. I'll give you some for helping me to retrieve it, but I'll take most of it as compensation for what I had to put up with today. $20 an hour isn't cutting edge, and I also have the rest of the students come out to help me with this, stealing the wire, promising a small portion of what I'm going to get for them. And I broke the window with the rock and made a small hole the size of a fist. You know, it would be a lot easier if someone goes inside the mansion and no. Every student replied once, okay, and never mind. Then we continue to bash in the window into. The hole was big enough to climb through, and we managed to load all the wires into the bus before the owners returned, even if they did return before they were done. We had already set up a place to hide the students, then organized the wire once we were already on the road. As I was about to arrive, at 5 o'clock, I saw the owners returning from their mission. I quickly put on my sunglasses as I forwarded the bus and blind and drove through the light. However, the owners were not interested in me and they continued their journey home, and it seems that the only attack to those who disturbed them and somehow and driving by their mansion, does that they still had no idea that I had freed their cats and to stole their wire. And even when they find out, they have no idea who did it. And I stopped 5 minutes later and dismissed Joseph and 4 other students. This bus stop was similar to stop 4, with very similar houses as well, and that is, 7 students in the bus. I knew what I had to do. Rule 13, the true end of this road, emojis with a larger set, a 3-way stop. If any students are still on the bus, once you passed all 5 stops, go back to the front of the road and try again. Keep doing this until all students have at least their stops, or if you get too tired to continue, my side, as I love to stop. You know you're going to have to drive down this road again right now. I know, hey, at least this time we'll be more prepared, and you know that there's a fake bus play between that stops 1 and 2, and you know that the magic is between us, stops 4 and 5. This doesn't refresh every time you go down the road, unlike the Rule 3 road and the dead end. Alright, I'll go back and do another round. As I continue down the road, I found the semi-truck, or what was left of that. I parked the bus and next to the truck, to get a better look at it, the trunk seemed to have crashed straight into a tree instead of turning Play the Caribbean. The trailer's walls were partially melted, causing the roof to collapse onto the burning wooden crates inside. The body of the truck was completely destroyed. It was only the chassis and engine block. Is still being recognizable Minnie Mouse. He remains of the cab. I saw the charge of skeleton of the driver, and it's terrifying to think that could have been me. Holy crap, a student, muttered Tommy, and I got out of the bus and played the east side of the truck to further investigate what the heck had happened here. Looking at the vague remains of the track, I determined that the skeleton was in the bed at the back of the cab. I theorized that the owner is blinding lights and caused the driver to be unable to see the road and was therefore unaware of the curve. And after the crash, driver hit in the back of the truck, and the beautiful position as the owner is brightened their lights to the point that the heat literally melted the steel body of the truck. This, combined with the fuel tanks that were set on fire, burned the drive to the point where it was just a skeleton. "Why are we losing this one too?" Tommy asked. "I don't think there's anything valuable that's still intact. I'm just investigating what the heck happened here. Look, man, I'm just as horrified as you are. I've heard of disappearances related to the Imagineers, but I've never seen what happened to them. The rules were just updated accordingly, and we returned to the bus to continue to down the road. I found the end of the road and made a left turn onto Route 3 and 10 to go back to the beginning of Old and Military Road. Not long after I got on the road, my heart is student scream, 'What the?' She was interrupted by her own choking. 'Stop the bus now, Tommy.' Instruction: several students fighting a wire that was strangling the student. The wires had come to life and were crawling around like snakes, and we evacuated the bus, and I locked the doors hoping that they couldn't unlock them once we were outside. I read the student from the wire that was choking her, and I then inspected that wire and saw the copper benton and contortion on its own." "The wires were?" Tommy asked rhetorically. I paused for a moment before I had an idea. I dialed N911, 911. "I managed to drop them all inside, but I can't get rid of them. I'm on Route 3 near the spot where Old Military Road and was pushed back onto the road by the guardrail." The bus continued accelerating as fast as it could while scraping against the guardrail to guide it down the highway. "The snakes just hijacked the bus." Tommy spoke for me. The operator tried their best to stay professional, but she couldn't avoid letting out a chuckle about how ridiculous this situation was. "What direction is the bus going?" "It's going east but is scraping against the guardrail to guide it down the roads." "Do you need a ride?" "Yes, ma'am, but there's a device. I'm a school bus driver." "Oh, okay, thank you, you're welcome in." A few minutes later, 3 police cars arrived. I told the officers to take us back to the bus yard, and as we drove down the highway and we found the bus, the Ys had figured out how to use the steering wheel, but still had no idea what they were doing. They were swerving all over the road attempting to not scrape against the guardrail. I don't think they had any other perception of reality outside of touch, multiple police cruisers, even a SWAT truck, or chasing the officer and the vehicle. I was in an interview with me as we traveled to our destination. "Sir, how did these snakes get into your eyes?" And I was at a bus stop when they somehow snuck in and tried to choke out one of my students, and we had to evacuate the bus so I could feel the student from the snake that was strangling her. I partially lied. "Why did you and your students evacuate the boys?" While I didn't want to be attacked by the snakes, as I thought the snake that was strangling one of my students. There were like 50 of them, so if I stayed in there, all of us probably would have been strangled to death. And we arrived at the bus yard a few minutes later, I think. The officers and I went to the Garden Inn. The officers then turned around and drove back to help pursue the boys. "Hey, guard, it's me again." The just left above the desk was a wall of a 6-monitor in the back wall, each displaying the input of a camera somewhere in the yard, and the desk had a laptop on it in front of 2 of the monitors, though those monitors can be seen at. The laptop is closed. The shack was large enough for all of us to fit inside. Lord was still a bit cramped. He picked up the paper. I saw him look at when I first got here. "Rules for Frederickson Bus Yard Guard. You must follow these rules when guarding the bus yard. We cannot ensure your safety if you break any of these rules. 1. Only the following people are permitted to enter the bus yard: Ernest Frederickson, Anna Evergreen, Harry Williams and George Redwood. If someone arrives that identifies as someone on this list, hold them at gunpoint until they leave, or you have to shoot them to defend yourself too. If a boss wants the vehicle in the yard that starts its engine for no reason, close the metal shades in the window and wait until it turns off and may attempt to accelerate, but all buses in vehicles should be in park, so this won't work. Do not, under any circumstances, make your presence known until the engine stops. 3. If one of the monitors starts showing static, smash it with the crowbar that we provided for you, if possible. If you are currently experiencing roll 2 at the same time, unplug the power strip. All the monitors are powered by and get as far away from the monitor as you can without accident in the shack. Keep track of which monitor was showing static earlier, so just putting a sticky note on it once ruled 2 lines, smash the monitor before turning the rest of them back on, for at any time a man may show up as a snack bar and give him something to eat, or you'll be the snack. If you cannot give him a snack and do the world to call us and continue hiding until we've dealt with the situation. 5 o'clock, if the sun turns red, don't like this guy for April, long period of time. You won't die, but the red sun will literally destroy your retinas if you look at it for more than a few seconds. The same may happen if you look at the sky, so it'll take a little longer. Both of these are safe to look at through a camera and pictures taken of the sky or sun cannot harm you, but they can damage the camera similar to how they can damage your eyes. Sex and don't sleep on the job, but just don't if you get too tired to continue your shaft alertness and will send someone to take your shit out to only leave once you replace it has arrived. Do not trust your peripheral vision if this happens. 7. If you see a shadow figure, show me the nearby area. Pretend that it doesn't exist. Do not let him know what I was. Physically entered our world. 8. At around 3 a.m. Your mother may show up and ask you about your job. She look like she does in the present, but if she's dead, she look like she did it shortly before her death. And if you're adopted, your biological mother will show up and act like she knows you. What if this happens? Pretend you don't know her and tell her to get out. After I read it, the students took turns reading the rules for themselves. As we were doing this, my bus showed up and it took a while to get it here as it kept hitting those things along the way, and the bus was still being chased by several police cruisers and the SWAT truck. We got out of the shack and watched as the whitest, completely ignored at the nearby, then turned the steering wheel as far as it could go before reversing any of these one of the buses. The wire is paused for a moment before they were about to continue their reckless journey. However, the hood was still open from when the engine was disabled by the creatures from Old Military Road. So one of the officers pulled out his shotgun and shot the engine repeatedly, and the most American thing I've ever seen. This actually worked, as one of the bullets sliced the serpentine belt, causing the bus to lose several important functions. The wires reversed back onto the road and a straight line, as they no longer have power steering. May it continue driving, but it couldn't do much due to the lack of power steering, and the engine eventually overheated and stopped, right before it struck that same tree again, this time causing it to fall over it and collapse onto the roof of the box. Once the wires were trying to figure out what was going on, the officers investigated the boss in the guard, the students, and I got closer now that the bus could no longer run us over. The officer that interviewed me earlier and I saw us approach the bus. "You call these things snakes?" he asked me rhetorically, and if I told you my boss was stolen by giant copper wearing, you would have not believed me. I replied, "I don't know. They seem stuck in there, so we might just leave them in there and tell the boys." I was about to reply when the officer's radio received a message: "Philip, an armored truck got on the road and is going westbound towards your location." "Sarah, weren't you blocking one of the entrances to the road?" "Yeah, but the vehicle drove over from my car and got on the road. It's that big. I think it's one of those Maras from that Top Gear episode. The rest of the officers were now set alarm for 11 to hear what Sarah was saying. I wasn't in the car, though. I was telling the driver why the road was closed when he drove over my car right after I told him why. All right, copy that. Philip ended the call. Yeah, you know what she said. Use your vehicles in the bus to form a barricade. This won't stop the truck, but it'll delay us long enough to open fire on it. The track eventually showed up and it was indeed a BlackBerry. La Mirada was being chased by even more police cars. A police helicopter was hovering far above us. Now the car barricade would stand no chance against the Marauder. The truck stopped and coming to the halt a few yards from the barricade, not because the barricade would stop it, but because the driver found what he was looking for, the boss. It was clear that the driver was looking for the wires implied by house. Swiftly he got on the. What happened to Sarah informs him why the road was closed. The officers took one look at the vehicle and they were screwed. The helicopter to send it and Harvard, next to the Marauder, but flood. When it started being shot at by a man in the passenger seat, I noticed that it was actually a news helicopter, which explains why it did that. One of the officers called the dispatcher. We're going to need backup. Send in the US military. There's no way. 2010 The Ford pickup, along with the police cruiser escorting it, arrived at the bus yard from Riverside Street. The truck drove through the hole created by the Boston stop beside us and the officer then the police cruiser went to join whatever was happening at the intersection. An old man was inside the truck, despite his age. He stepped out of the truck with these refers, the garden and confusion. The students start what's confusion? Giving us a look that said, wait, you don't know this guy. After an awkward moment of silence, the man identified himself. No, I'm Ernest Fredrickson, the dude who hired you. Sorry about that, not knowing that this guy was. A million questions I went through my head, but before I could ask any of those questions, the driver of the Marauder opened his door to throw grenades at the office, but he made it almost take. Either he didn't notice us standing in a 2008 or I didn't expect us to intervene. This is when I leapt into action and I grabbed the guard's hand and we ran to the truck. Ernest pulled out his firearm and joined us. The driver noticed us and quickly threw the grenades he already activated in advance and then he tried to close the door and what's before he was able to. I managed to get my left wrist and stuck between the door and the wall of the truck stopping the door from being closed. The driver, could you repeat, at least slammed the door on my wrist, hoping that I would remove it because of the pain, but I didn't. While this was happening, the guard and Ernest opened fire at the driver. About half the bullets struck the door, but the other half and managed to get into the cab and most of those at the driver. We ripped the door out of the dead man's grip and I climbed into the truck to unbuckle with seat belt so we could remove the body from the seat. But when I climbed into the truck and I found the man in the passenger seat, with the exact same attire as the driver, that being would seem to be a black version of what the US Army wears. I noticed that he had a rifle, so I was forced to shoot him to avoid being shot myself. All of this happened in less than 10 seconds. The grenades the driver threw earlier landed behind the barricade and blob, injuring a little officers. Some of these surviving officers that tended to the injured ones authorized it came over to the Marauder to inspect it. The three of us returned to the yard where the kids were and shortly after the officers had entered the Marauder. The back door is opened and amen. I rushed out of the truck and they all the same entire as the two in the front, and 3 of them had briefcases. For some reason, 5 officers had chased them on foot. We all thought this was the end. None of them had any weapons, or at least we thought. The one with the Jason stopped for a moment and threw their briefcases at the office area as one of them had managed to strike an officer and knocking him to the ground. But the briefcases had another use other than being a projectile, because as the officers passed them they were detonated, causing a massive explosion. Chunks of briefcase were flying out where the functioning in a shrapnel. One of them had Tommy, had two with the girl who was being strangled by the way earlier. One had Angela and two more hits me and Ernest. Luckily we all survived with the minor injuries. When the smoke cleared up we saw the scene that lied before us. The Marauders suffered a very little damage and the bus's body was heavily damaged but still intact, including the windows. The windshield was struck by 4 briefcase chunks, leaving a spider web, cracks where they collide with the windshield. The body of the police cars ripped apart from the force of and the fuel tanks for spilling gasoline all over the road. Even the traffic lights at the intersection were bent. The 7th is arrived from Riverside Street intending to treat the office is injured by the grenade explosion but found far more than they bargained for her. But in a dark twist of irony here, this was still enough ambulances to transport the surviving officers to the hospital. Out of the 8 men in the back of the Marauder, 5 of them survived with minor injuries. The other 3 were dead or seriously injured. All 7 of the kids hid in the guard shack as the guard, Ernest, and I approached the group with our weapons drawn as soon as they saw us say healthy ones and dropped their comrades and fled down on Route 3 on foot in the same direction that the Marauder came from. The 3 of us chased them and managed to shoot all 5 of them. And we walked back to the yard and saw a man talking with play paramedics. What do you mean? The snack bar is right there. What do you mean? It's not open, crap. They didn't know. Rule number 4, at any time a man may show up thinking your shack is a snack bar. Give him something to eat or you'll be the snack. And if you cannot give him a snack, do the world to call us and continue hiding until we've dealt with the situation. We continue to approach in the ambulances, but still try not to attract the man's attention. Sir. Where, paramedics, we do not have a snack bar. The man went from my way to angry. His voice became incredibly deep and demonic. Give me a snack right now. The paramedics stared at the man very confused at what just happened. The man's fingernails grew incredibly quickly and they transformed into clothes in the process. He used his Wolverine hands to attack the man, peeling off a thick and large chunk of forearm. The paramedic ran off and screamed in agony and, due to being literally skinned alive, the man's fingernails broke off into. The man returned to normal. Thanks, have a nice day, he said, as if you just bought this chunk of human flesh from my snack bar. He left in the direction he seemed to have come from. Several shadow figures appear near him and wandered aimlessly. Rule 7, if you see a shadow figure roaming their nearby area, pretend that it doesn't best, don't let him know that it is physically entered our world. And I walked up to the paramedics to inform them of Rule 7. Luckily they complied, as they all witnessed what happens if you break a rule, for the paramedics continue loading the injured officers into the ambulances with the one that was skinned alive joining them when the heavy-duty tow truck that was going way too fast for Riverside Street bashed through 2 of the ambulances that way, making a sharp right turn into the left lane of Route 3, almost flipping over in the process. This truck was definitely able to tell the boys and that's exactly what they did. The truck reversed to the bus and 2 men got out, almost identical to the 10 in the Marauder, and quickly hooked up the bus to the tow cable. The men got back into the truck and sped off in the direction that the truck was facing. This all happened within 15 seconds. The paramedics, both of the ambulances that were damaged and were still drivable, one of the paramedics was entered by the truck's crash, haven't been ran over by his own ambulance and had to be transported to the hospital by his co-workers. He is expected to make a full recovery. Out of these 17 officers that were at this war zone, only 7 survived. All 5 of the officers that were listened to the man were blown to bits due to being so close to the explosion. The 3 officers were inside of the Marauder at the time of the explosion and they all survived with virtually no injuries, as 7 officers were injured by the grenades. Out of them were declared dead at the scene, 2 died on the way to the hospital and only 1 survived. She is severely injured but is expected to make a full recovery. Out of the 4 officers attending to the injured 7 o'clock, 1 died at the scene, that 1 was critically injured and the other 2 survived with minor injuries as they were behind the bus at the time. The 1 that was critically injured is also expected to make a full recovery. I don't know where the other 6 officers were at the time of the explosion, but they all died at the scene, and when interviewed, I told him what happened and explained that I said snakes because they wouldn't believe me if I told him the truth. The only difference is that I said a pile of copper wires was next to a bus stop and they invaded the buyers. The students all told the same lie. Ernest, the guard in the surviving officers, back to my story, saying that there were wires in the bus. None of us were charged with anything, and then the 3 of us. That's rated. The Marauder were praised for our bravery. All 10 of the men died at the scene. Their bodies it couldn't be identified. The Marauder was impounded by the police and its license plate vehicle is registered under the name Alfred Cornell. What's the address? And being resident somewhere in Maine. When the police went to that location, they found an empty lot in a semi-remote location with nothing on it other than a brick wall that was 20 feet long, 8 feet tall and 1 foot wide. The tow truck in. My boss were never seen again, for now at least. Ernest trying to track down the bus, but its tracker was disabled. The news station that tried to film the massacre was ordered by the federal government to delete the limited footage they had captured and to never speak of this until further notice. The rest of us that witnessed the event were essentially given endas by the government. The family members of the dead officers were given large settlements. These surviving officers had their medical bills paid for her and they were given a smaller settlement for the troubles. The 7 students said didn't make it to the stop or taken care of by Ernest, his wife, and his 3 middle-aged children until they could be returned home. Mariners told me that I wasn't actually being paid $20 an hour. The adults only listed that way to not attract unwanted attention. I was actually being paid at $200 an hour and he gave me a $1,000 bonus for my troubles today. The guard's wage was also multiplied by 10 and he also got $1,000. I told Ernest what actually happened and we now have a 14th rule for the bus drivers. Rule for 10, do not steal from the mansion on earth, because they will find you and they will do whatever it takes to get their stuff back.